Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched, where this week I watched Moneyball from 2011. This is a movie I actually didn't realize was as old as it is at this point. 14 years. Didn't realize that. Felt like it came out a few years ago. Anyway, my reasons for watching this I will get into. I've actually did and did not want to watch this movie for some time and kind of never got around to it for reasons that should become apparent. This movie is based on a book, as many movies are, but it is based on a non-fiction book by Michael Lewis that I read when it came out. Now, on a personal note, and this is something that very few people know about me, including a lot of my friends, because it was when I was much younger, I used to be really into baseball. Not anymore, not really at all anymore. But there was a period of time when I was very into baseball and baseball statistics and following the leagues and the various teams, and some more than others. And Moneyball came out in, I believe, 2005, the book that is, which was a few years after most of the events that are covered in the book itself and in this movie, which I think this movie is more or less set in 2002. But we'll get to the differences between the book and the movie at a later point. Like I said, this is primarily a nonfiction book, and Michael Lewis is primarily a nonfiction writer. I'm a big fan of Michael Lewis's work. I think he's a very good journalist and he's been around for a very long time. He has generally a very good reputation as a journalist and does very deep research into very niche, specific, and really interesting topics. He always finds interesting things to do his writing on, whether he's doing that in book form or otherwise. As of late, I think he's been doing more in the realm of podcast reporting and that sort of stuff, which is an interesting change. But anyway, I digress. He's a very, very good writer. And in fact, if you have any interest in any of the subject here, even if you don't have any interest in baseball, Moneyball is a really interesting book to read if you have some curiosity about how you can use analytics and statistics to look at data and extrapolate a lot of new information out of fairly limited data, or data that doesn't seem that important. And so when I found out they were making a movie from that book, I was a little curious, to say the least. The book is very data heavy and very data driven, and it is not really in the form of, to my recollection, it's been many years now, to my memory, not very much in the form of a story. It's more a collection of anecdotes. It follows a bunch of different individuals and their relationship to this team and all the people they're in, and is much less about telling one succinct narrative. So how you turn that into a Hollywood film, especially one that's palatable to the general public, was always going to be a dubious prospect. And to be perfectly honest, at the time they were announcing it, I think I also wrote it off because of, in some way, because it had Brad Pitt as the lead actor. And to me, less so now, but in a different way. I've always sort of felt that if you have to put a big lead actor on a kind of small film in order to make it sell tickets, that maybe you don't have the best of intentions in terms of doing that story its justice. So I was a little dubious. I'm not going to bury the lead anymore. Little did I know how disappointed I would be in this film. And that's despite the fact that this film has a very good reputation and got lots of awards and award nominations, including, I think, 5 or 6 Academy Award nominations. I don't know how that happened, but we'll get into that in a minute. Where do I even start with this? Okay, so rather than telling a story about a team and a couple of individuals in the management side and the analytics side, and then extrapolating to various players and how they played their roles in that team, like the book does, the movie follows a very rote, kind of boring, for want of a better phrase, plot line. And it basically follows the team from more or less the preseason to the end of a season. That's not inherently a problem. That's fairly standard, I would say, for most sports films, as we've talked about some others on this show before, and the ups and downs of sports films. That usually works quite well in a sports film and is it has a normal arc of building and then releasing and the climax and all these other normal parts of a storyline, because it follows the growth of a team and the successes where there were once failures and all these normal things that one would expect out of any story on a very basic level, right? But not only does that lose in this context almost everything interesting about the story, it also does it in an incredibly sloppy way. And the primary issue here is that the movie is almost entirely focused on Brad Pitt's character, who has come off the screen, by the way. I meant to say that near the beginning. I took him off the screen ages ago now and I'm using a fan cover for this movie because I hate that cover. It's just fucking Brad Pitt sitting in some stands. It's awful. Anyway, sidebar aside, Brad Pitt isn't wrong for this role, but they make the movie about Brad Pitt, about Billy Beane. And Billy Beane is central to the story as a person. He's central to the reason why the Athletics did what they did at that time, and why Moneyball is an interesting story, because the Athletics were a team that had, I think it was the lowest salary cap except for one. And getting into all of the ways that baseball financing works is a very complicated topic that, again, the movie doesn't really go into at all, but the book does. It's a really interesting topic, but rather than focus on any of that, they focus on Billy Beane. And in the book, he is a central character because he has to be. He's the general manager of the Athletics at the time. He is central to these sea changes. But the whole point is that the whole point of the book basically is that he came in and gave lots of smart people the opportunities to upend the standards that were being used at the time in baseball for how they hired people and how they built teams. And those opportunities were not just, they weren't just him. They weren't, or it wasn't him and one other guy, which, by the way, the other main character, whose name I don't remember because it doesn't matter, the other main character in this film, played by Jonah Hill, doesn't exist. He's not a real person. Like Billy Beane, real person. It actually might be a blessing that Jonah Hill's character is not a real person, because the Billy Beane as portrayed by Brad Pitt, I'm forgetting the names. Sorry, that's why I have these pauses. The Billy Beane, the version of Billy Beane as portrayed by Brad Pitt in this film, it's just Brad Pitt. Same as I've talked about before. He's a totally acceptable actor who just does variations of himself. He also really does not fit the character. However this character was written, he does not fit the reality of Billy Beane and his reputation within the Athletics and within baseball in general. Obviously, this is a movie that focuses much more on his personal life, which I don't believe Billy Beane's personal life has been particularly public in over his career. but the whole movie hinges on being invested in Billy Bean's personal life for no reason, instead of baseball and statistics and an underdog story, which is the interesting part. And in addition to him not being represented well, the other Philip Seymour Hoffman plays I'm forgetting his name now. Art something. It'll come back to me. But he plays the head coach of the Athletics at the time, who was also a well-known figure in baseball at the time, and also had a bit of a character reputation that this does not match at all, and apparently has also come out after the fact and said, this isn't how I was at all, and other people who were represented in the film. Oh, sorry, the fourth person who is also played in the film, in this case by Chris, what's his face? Chris Pratt. Oh my God, I'm losing it. Chris Pratt plays Scott Hatterberg, who is was a player on the Athletics at the time, and is a notable character in the movie and in the book and in the history of the A's, but also is like the only, basically the only, he's the main player character. And oh God, I'm getting derailed. He's apparently, so Scott Hatterberg, my point was, Scott Hatterberg, the real person, came out and said, yeah, Art Howe was completely misrepresented in this film, and the relationship between the two of us was nothing like that. Which makes sense, because Art Howe is in reality never seemed to be anything like the version that Philip Seymour Hoffman is playing in this film. So to get back to talking about the cast again, Chris Pratt is totally fine. He actually might be one of the better actors in this film, but almost all of the actors have fairly limited time on screen, with the exception of Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill. Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill are just doing their normal thing of being their normal selves, but I also know that all three of them are capable of better performances, because I've seen all three of them in other things doing better performances, even though I don't think any of them are particularly good actors. And then there's Philip Seymour Hoffman, who is playing a character who is barely present in the film, who is completely misrepresented, as far as myself and apparently other people inside the organization have the perspective of, and also who is an incredible actor. And as I've talked about, I believe previously on this show, to my mind, one of the greatest actors of all time, potentially. Philip Seymour Hoffman is an incredible talent, and he does nothing in this film. He's here for what? For like 3 scenes, and he's barely doing anything. Like, I guess it's fine. I guess if he didn't do anything wrong. It's just there was no reason to cast Philip Seymour Hoffman, except that I believe, in a little cursory search, that Philip Seymour Hoffman and the director, Bennett Miller, is that the name? That's the name. Who knew each other and may even have gone to school together. Bennett Miller also directed Capote, which is a much better film than this, and stars Philip Seymour Hoffman as well. So I'm not going to necessarily say nepotism there, but also this director was the third director on this film, not the first choice. So I don't know how that all worked out behind the scenes, but whatever. Anyway, I don't know which direction that flows in and why Philip Seymour Hoffman was here, but his talents are completely wasted, really. So to come back around, 70% of this film is focused on Brad Pitt's character, Brad Pitt playing Billy Bean, and on his nebulous personal emotional struggle to to be the GM of the A's at the time, which is not what the book is about at all, and is not interesting, and is written really dull. It's very rote. His relationship, it's like a very, very cliche relationship written between him and his ex-wife and his like slightly estranged daughter and her stepfather and like all this other garbage, and then his relationship with the other management people, whether it's Art Howe or any of the or Scott Hatterberg as the main, basically one of the only players who has significant on-screen time, or any of the other players for that matter, is incredibly shallow, and what's there is fairly trite. Now, it's not horribly written. It's more that I was trying to, I couldn't shake it, because I was watching this trying to figure out what was right and what was wrong with it, because it's not written terribly. Individual scenes are written fairly well if you take them just out of context. Like the actual writing itself, the dialogue, the banter between characters and stuff works fairly well. But I found out after the fact, I'm going to chalk that up entirely to Aaron Sorkin, who apparently did significant rewrites on this movie long into production, and I'm going to hold almost completely responsible for the quality of the dialogue, because Aaron Sorkin writes dialogue like no others, like no other. But you can still butcher Aaron Sorkin's dialogue if you have mediocre actors being directed poorly in a movie that is overall structured poorly and focuses on the dullest elements of a story. You can punch it up, which I think is what happened, and you can make the scenes work individually, but you can't fix the overall structure that way. And that is what I'm kind of taking from this as what happened as a result of a lot of rewrites, a lot of administrative stuff that went on behind the scenes. And I'm not going to summarize the wiki article or the IMDb for you here, but in addition to all of these other changes that were made, the original writing of it was supposed to be apparently supposed to be closer to a documentary style, and it was going to be directed by Steven Soderbergh, who we've also talked about previously on this show, who I have my ups and downs with, but generally think would have been a much more interesting choice, if nothing else. So, what do we have here in this movie? Well, we've got a movie that has mediocre direction, mediocre writing, cinematography that's largely dull. I mean, it's usually not offensive to the eye, but there is so much cutting and pasting and use of historical footage, because they cut in a lot of footage from the actual games that were happening throughout this season and stuff like that, so they're not actually even using the actors, all to tell a story that is mainly focused on, so big air quotes, Billy Bean and his emotional arc over the course of a single season, rather than delving into any of the interesting aspects to my mind, which are the way that this upended the baseball as a whole, and the way that bringing various people in affected the structure of the team, and the structure of the administration of that team, and the structure of Major League Baseball in general. And Moneyball, to my memory, the book, does not cover a single season. It's covering a lot of different aspects. It's talking about how they got to this point, and the reason why, why did it look so risky to be taking all of these fairly cheap, air quotes, players and trying to put them on a team together and piece together something that was meaningful. And instead, the very limited runtime that's actually dedicated to the team and the meaningful parts of the Moneyball story, all of those are relegated down to the most basic tropes of a sports movie, where the team isn't working and then it starts to work and then they get a little confidence and then they go a long way and then maybe they win at the end or maybe they don't, who knows, but everybody comes away from it feeling more fulfilled as a result, and it's just boring. I've seen it so many times, and I've seen it done so many times so much better. And that's the worst part, is that this movie is just dull. It's filled with it's a dull story being shown in a dull way that's also just paced like garbage because it's so focused on on the aspects of the story that weren't when the movie sets itself up, it doesn't set itself up as a Billy Bean story, but then it proceeds to be one for 70% of the rest of the runtime. So they, bait and switch you for the most part. And then you just lose any intrigue or anything unique about it, or the historicity of it, the relevance to Major League Baseball in general, or to the individual people who were present there at that time as managers or coaches or players or whatever. And so nothing has any weight. Nobody has any depth of character, and you're not invested, and you're bored at the end when whatever happens, and everybody's just sort of like, okay, I guess we had a baseball season. I wasn't super emotionally invested. On top of all of this, it's just produced badly. Just, this is as a side note at this point, like, in addition to the cinematography being pretty questionable at times, it's ugly. This is an ugly movie that has got this, that actually, that's another bait and switch. That horrible cover that I showed only at the beginning of the film, or only at the beginning of this video, actually is the most vibrant thing that you'll see, because the entire movie is not that vibrant. It's all dulled down in this gray and brown muddy post-processing for no apparent reason, especially because like the A's uniforms are these brilliant like green and gold, and really striking, and why you would dull that down with all of this color grading, I don't know, among just being like not very visually engaging, but maybe that's just the damnation of the 2010s Hollywood visual styling, I don't know. And then on top of that, most of the music is either, to my ear, some of it is straight up stock music, and then some of it is like directly licensed music that barely has a place in the movie, and then the rest of it is completely unremarkable and often kind of out of place. And then the rest of the audio editing is really poor. There are notable chunks of this film that are just ADR'd like garbage, or should have been ADR'd but then weren't. There's a scene towards the end of the film where I'm just like, did you guys just lose the audio for this, and you only had the camera pick up audio for this scene? Is that why this scene sounds like this? This sounds awful. And then there's several others where it's just like, this is really obviously ADR'd and not mixed down at any point after the fact. It just sounds bad. So that really just adds up to a movie that feels cheap, feels like a vehicle for Brad Pitt for no reason, because I don't think he wanted this. And possibly the only thing of note that comes out of it is that this is a fairly early role for Chris Pratt, like before he achieved any stardom. I don't remember if I think this was about the same time or just after he had been on Parks and Rec, so he was still fairly unknown. But yeah, it's just a bizarre, boring movie that I cannot figure out why it would have been nominated for any awards, let alone the Academy Awards for Best Picture and Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor, among others. Like, according to who? Who was watching this? Like, I don't know what the competition was in 2011, but this is dire. Anyway, if you're interested in an actual, if you're interested in anything really at all, don't watch this movie, read the book instead. If you're interested in baseball, read the book. If you're interested in statistics and their practical usage and underdog stories and all these other things, read the book. The book's a fairly quick read. To my memory, it's fairly short. And it's not like super dense in terms of its terminology or anything. It's very like, that's Michael Lewis is a really good writer. That is one of the reasons why he's a really good writer. He knows how to present that information in a very digestible way. So just read the book. Don't watch this. I'm so disappointed. It could have been more offensive, but it's just dull. It's just dull and bad. Anyway, I should go before I keep rambling in the same circle for a lot longer. Thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'll see you guys next time. Oh, wait, no, I take it back. One last thing. I was staring at one of the actors throughout the entire film and I couldn't recognize who it was. And it wasn't until I was like, I know this person's face, but I can't place them in anything. And then I looked it up after and it's fucking Bobby Kotick. Bobby Kotick plays the owner of the A's at the time, who they go to in a couple of scenes, and fuck Bobby Kotick. Fuck you, Bobby Kotick. Get the fuck out of everything ever done. I don't want to see your fucking smug face anywhere ever again.